I'm Josh Muccio, and from Gimlet Media, this is The Pitch, where real entrepreneurs pitch to real investors.
I think so too.
And he was lovely.
Hey.
Hi there.
How are you?
Fantastic. How are you? What's your
Doing
name?
good.
Into the room has walked Amado Guloy, who's here to ask for $2 million for his company, Rex Animal Health, which is built on a simple theory about the health of livestock.
If things were more data-driven, then veterinary care could be better.
These days, you can't hear about any startup without someone mentioning data. But when I think of rolling pastures and dairy cows, it doesn't exactly scream tech startup to me. So I'm curious to see if Amado can make a case for why the humble farm is the next frontier for big data. Here's who he needs to convince. Daniel Galati is here with Comcast Ventures, along with Jillian Manis with Structure Capital, Phil Nadell of Forefront Venture Partners, and Charles Hudson with Precursor Ventures. Now, it's all up to Amado to prove Rex is the next big thing in big data.
I'm Amado Guloy. I'm the CEO and founder of Rex Animal Health.
I'm sorry, what was your first name?
Amado.
Amado.
Yes, sir. Amado.
Fantastic.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, nice to meet you. Tell us about Rex.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're doing at Rex is really we're trying to answer fundamental questions about food sustainability, biosecurity, and food safety, especially when it comes to the protein supply chain.
All right, here's the thing you need to understand about Amado. He's not your typical entrepreneur. He doesn't have a million business ideas and a passion for startup culture. He's a scientist, specifically a chemist and a physicist, who stumbled onto an idea that turned into a business. And it shows in his pitch.
But we do our own primary fundamental research in our labs so that we can find genes that correlate with disease resistance. And I'm proud to say we've actually found some genes after completing a few genomes in the white-tailed deer and looking at the cow. And so we're in the midst of publishing that in a peer-reviewed scientific journal.
All right, so here's what Amado is not explaining, at least not in a way anyone is quite understanding. Rex is a tech company that is focused on improving the health of livestock, cows, pigs, chickens, etc., by relying on big data.
We're not a company that says we're here to replace your veterinarians. We're here simply to supplement them.
So let's say a cow gets sick. The farmer calls the vet treats it, everyone goes on with their lives. But sometimes that cow gets sick a second time, or a third time, or its offspring gets sick, or the drugs that treat it don't work. No one is really tracking this. So Amado wants farmers to enter this health information into a database. The idea being that this will help these farms detect health and genetic trends in their livestock. But he's not really explaining all that. He's talking like, well, a scientist.
Let's say you have a sick animal. It had, some respiratory, it was coughing. Yeah. That's usually going to be scaled anywhere from 1 to 10 or 1 to 6. You administer a drug, you check it, and then that changes the score. But one of the things that we're able to do that human intuition can't is isolate which drug or which nutraceutical actually was the most effective.
Our investors are doing their best to follow along, but you can tell they're a little bit lost.
Well, explain that, please. So there are no sick animals on day one. What is the customer entering into the system? What data are they providing, and what output are they getting?
So I guess to give a little bit background on what happens during a run-through in the barn, basically you have a vet tech or a farmer walk through their barn, and there's hundreds, if not thousands of animals. They're checking each and every stall and scoring every single animal on a respiratory score and what's called a scour score, which is basically like a diarrhea score. They input that in on a almost daily basis. And so that gets to us, and we can monitor these scores to see, and they can then look at it to be like, is there a trend? Is the respiratory score
so it's
raising?
a maintenance of the health of the life of the animal.
So
Google Analytics for livestock.
Right, so they're monitoring. What you're doing is you're taking these daily scores or almost daily scores that the vet tech is giving the herd, and then you're standardizing the data. You're putting it up into the dashboard so you can see it, they can see it. So all of a sudden you see trends in the scores change, and then you can go into action in terms of trying to figure out what's causing that change. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I want to just make sure.
And the action
As Daniel said, it's Google Analytics for livestock. Rex keeps track of the health of the herd, watches for trends, and helps farmers and pharmaceutical companies know which drugs are working and which aren't, all through the magic of data.
So I think I'm very dense, on this. Is this to collect and create data sets to be able to inform higher production of protein sources, animal protein sources?
Yes, ma'am. So, our fundamental goal is really to take this data and develop all these analytics around it so you can enhance your yield, whether that's having better quality steak with marbling, or having targeted dairy, like either high protein dairy for kind of yogurt applications and cheese applications, or high cream dairy for, milk and ice cream. But also combining that to also better manage disease in the herd, because when you look at animal health in general, the United States is one of the most advanced agricultural economies in the world. We still have at least one endemic or epidemic in the herd every year. And that grossly affects things to the GDP. If you look in 2015, there was a new emerging virus called PED, porcine epidemic diarrhea. Never been seen before. It wiped out piglets like that. And when you look at kind of how fast bird flu is mutating in all different regions,
and
that's
mad
huge
cow
danger.
disease
Years ago.
years ago.
Yes, ma'am.
Do you remember that? The
I remember mad cow
I do.
disease.
Right?
Amado is starting to speak the investor's language. He's saying livestock farms are businesses, and these health epidemics, mad cow disease or bird flu or whatever, they threaten these businesses. By gathering data on the health of these animals, Rex can reduce the risk of disease, improve the treatment of health problems, and ultimately deliver more of those animals from farm to table.
I'll just give you a use case of something that we did. So there were chickens, right? And there was a high incidence of really bad bacterial infection that they basically had to kill these chickens and turkey. And they were looking at the different drugs, and unfortunately a lot of these drugs weren't working because these were antibiotic resistant bacteria. So we took a step back and looked at the data in total. We were like, wait a minute, this population is not really having these infections, but this population is. What else was different? Then we kind of realized that the ones that got infection through basically a skin lesion. Long story short, we basically found out like it was a genetic effect. And those chickens that had that deficiency were prone to this skin condition, and that's what got infected.
I wish we'd started with with the story.
Yes.
I wish we had started with this story.
You're
Sorry.
Totally get it. I feel like I totally get it.
Whew. Don't ever underestimate the power of a story, even if the story has to do with bacterial infections in chickens. So at last, the investors are all on the same page. They get Rex, why it exists, what it does, and now they're ready to do what they do best. Start poking holes in the business.
So I'm worried about the data entry, to tell you a piece, because you're talking about farmers, you're talking about country vets, you're talking about that. It seems very I don't know. Can you explain a little bit about that? Because I would think that that's something you're going to have to. That's not part of their behavior.
So with respect to the data entry, that is part of their behavior. One of the things that a lot of these vertically integrated farms and even vets who go to small farms do is they'll literally hire DVM students, veterinary students, to turn those paper records and just do data entry as
okay.
there.
Good
So that's
to know.
part, and that's a behavior that's always been there.
Okay,
What we're
good.
able to do is remove kind of that necessity to do kind of that data entry, so that way all the students and even the veterinarians can just get to the analysis.
More sophisticated than I thought.
Yes, ma'am. We've been working on this for
Yes.
a little bit. So
Yes.
It may surprise you to learn that the investors don't spend a lot of time on livestock farms. But yeah, these farms have sophisticated data gathering practices in place. So Amado isn't trying to change anyone's behavior. He just figures if farms are already gathering data on their livestock, wouldn't they want to learn more from that data?
How much are you charging for the product?
So when it comes to our business model, we do two things, right? So we're a data company, right, that builds data products. So for a livestock producer that only wants to look at their data, they don't care about understanding anyone else's, we actually only charge them upfront costs on the server.
Which is?
It depends on how much data there is, right? Like,
Give me a sort of
it's
a range.
basically like $1,000 or less.
And that's a cost recovery. There's no margin on that.
There's no margin on that. The reason we do that, though, is because when we take in the raw data, our contract turns that raw data, any derivative product of that data is ours, and we can do whatever we want with it.
Yeah.
Now, all that data is really valuable to other verticals in the animal health industry, particularly biopharma. They need that data because they don't have it. And that's where we make a lot more of our money, because they'll try to get it from the livestock producers, but even when they do get it, they can't make sense of it.
And are you working with those guys
Yes.
today?
We're working with some very large pharmaceutical companies.
Like
for us, it was bang for our buck to go for the biggest players first.
Yeah.
And then kind of trickle down all the smaller ones, because really data's our currency, right?
Okay. And their access is different than the local farmers' access, right? So they're getting data across the board.
Because they're paying far more. I mean,
Right,
that's
of
what
course.
they want.
They've got to be 7-figure deals.
Yeah.
That's great.
This is like...
The wows you're hearing in the room is it dawning on investors that the two clients Amado is targeting with Rex are farmers and pharma, aka pharmaceutical companies known for their deep pockets.
You don't think those big companies have data scientists on board?
No. That's how we got some of our first customers.
I think that's the exit.
Literally.
How much revenue are you generating currently?
So in terms of revenue generated to date, about $3 million from when we started.
When
For
was
this
that?
Did you
year,
start?
pardon?
Sorry.
When was
From
that?
2015. We've been mostly a bootstrapped company.
Okay, so let's talk, quarterly this year.
So this year how do I put it this way? We've had some stumbles in 2017 and late 2016. So our average revenue per month is about 85K to 95K.
What have the stumbles been?
The stumbles were we had people not paying, and that was kind of, we weren't aggressive enough in trying to make them pay. We actually did some studies where they never paid us because we were like, well, you never told us to pay you, and it was I thought that was a given.
So-
So that brings up a point, sort of.
If you're...
You're the scientist guy. Who's running the business end of it? Who's
Right.
in charge of collections and doing the invoicing and all that
yeah,
stuff?
so since that stumble, we've actually hired a COO who's really the main business guy.
What's his name?
His name's Eric.
Okay.
So we did realize, like, hey, I know I'm a scientist. I know I'm more the technical guy, which is why we brought that in. Before, we were all over the place, and that's primarily because, as a very technical scientific CEO, like, obviously we were very intrigued by the science, and we kind of got lost in the science. Now I have that person who, whenever one of us gets an idea, he'll usually be like, Amado, are we going to make money off this?
Are we going to make money off of this? That is the question. The fact that Amado knew enough to know that he needed someone else to run the business side of things is a good sign. Investors like to hear someone is thinking about the dollars and cents behind the big idea. But Amado is the one here pitching, and so it's unclear what the biggest priority is: the science of Rex or the business of Rex.
One of the things we've realized over the past 2 years is the United States is not a fertile market for agriculture tech. And that's primarily because the USDA gives so many subsidies that it's still cheaper for a farmer to cull their animals because they're going to be insured. We're taking this raise to really focus on the APAC region, particularly Australia, New Zealand, and China. So the reason that is because, one, China's, with its growing population, they also have the biggest growing demand for meat. Australia is one of the leaders in beef, and the largest producer of dairy is, believe it or not, based in New Zealand.
No way.
Fonterra. They produce 35% of dairy in the world, and they sell it a lot to China. So a lot of this is to hire teams based there, so that we can really take advantage of the opportunity we've been presented with.
And just like that, Amado the scientist starts talking about international markets, the agricultural economies of New Zealand and China and Australia, Suddenly, the nerdy chemist who came in talking about genomes and white-tailed deer sounds like an entrepreneur. He's like, baby, I need that $2 million because we're going global.
Is $2 million enough? I mean, I was just going to say, country market entry strategies tend to be notoriously expensive and slow because you've got to find the people, you've got to build even if they have the relationships, you've got to get up to speed, and then you've got to have some results. And is $2 million enough to get you to results?
We already have relationships with some of these really big customers, and they've already pretty much put in LOIs to say, hey, if you can do this, this is how much we'll pay based on the LOIs that we have. Should take us to another level in terms of revenue, and then we can raise again in a Series A. That's why it's at $2 million.
Okay. Well, I've digested a lot. Has everybody?
Yes, I've learned a lot.
I've learned a lot.
It's decision time. First up, Phil.
So, I like what you're doing. I think it's very interesting. I don't have any background in this, and so this is challenging for me to sort of wrap my head around. I don't know the space. I don't know the competition.
May I say something?
No.
Okay.
No, go ahead. All right. Go ahead.
So, Phil?
When it comes to investors, what we're looking for is not people who understand ag or are intimately familiar with that.
Oh, then I'm perfect.
We have ag families that are currently investors, and that's kind of how we've gotten a lot of our early traction. What we're looking for is people who know how to build an enterprise SaaS company, because that's fundamentally what we are.
The reason I was bringing that up was not in terms of potential value add, but more in terms of sort of coming to my investment decision, right? It's more challenging for me than with some other companies because this is a space about which I'm unfamiliar. And for instance, I don't have a really good handle on the competition. I don't know, I'm taking your word for it, and that's fine. And but having said that, I'm really intrigued by what I've heard and the progress that you've made, and I'd like to invest $250,000.
Oh, awesome!
Didn't see that coming.
Yeah, neither did I. Whoa.
Yeah, I like it. I think it has huge potential.
Okay. Thank you.
Right out of the gate, Phil's in for $250K.
Anyone else care to join me?
Here's Daniel.
So, by the way, I think it's actually a great deal in terms of the 2-on-8.
Yeah.
I think it's an awesome deal.
Yeah.
I think to get comfortable with this investment, or for me to get comfortable with this investment, I've got to believe in the scientific innovation here, essentially. And that's the bit that I would just need to educate myself on. So I'm a like neither yes or a no. I'd love to like diligence this further.
Of course.
If you're up for it.
Oh yeah, I mean,
I hate giving like a crappy answer like that, but I feel like it really is predicated on the science, and I'm just not a scientist, right?
That's
and so if you're willing to let me flip a card and learn a little bit more about the science, I'll get there on a yes or no after that. And so I'm a maybe.
That's fair. But
and I will say if we're a yes, then I think we'll want to own 10% of the company.
Okay.
Or more.
So Daniel's not ready to take Amado's word for it on the science, and so he's a solid maybe.
Julian.
I'm so confused. I'm confusing myself because I keep going back and forth and back and forth. So I actually do know a little about genomics. I do very, very little, and I put that into a thimble, but it's an area that I'm fascinating with. And I also like the fact that you were like, you know what? I don't know the business side. Yeah. Money is being left on the table. Yeah. I have to figure out what makes sense I like the fact that you were developing products that would make money. And there are a lot of scientists that are like forget that. I'm going to do what I'm going to do. So I like the fact that you have that business sense, even if you don't have the business intelligence around it. But you did hire Eric to do that. I want to commit to this round, okay? I'm going to say just of my personal money, all right? I'm going to commit 100,000.
So Jillian is throwing her hat into the ring as well, with a $100,000 personal investment. That's $350K already. So what does Charles have to say?
I have a really good feeling about you. I think you understand your customer and like their pain points. Our model at Precursor is really to bet on people first. And I just have a really good sense that you really understand what you're building and you really understand your customers' pain points. And that's rare to find. So I would like to invest a small amount in the company, which to me would be below $100,000.
Fine.
I don't know exactly how much, but I would love the opportunity to get to know you better and understand the business better and see if I can be value add.
Okay, I'll take your money. After racking up 3 yeses and 1 strong maybe, Amado looks pretty pleased.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
After Amado walks out of the room, investors dig in to why this deal seemed like a no-brainer.
You
These guys just throwing, just writing checks, just throwing it there.
I have to say that if
I really liked him.
Yeah.
If what he is communicating is true,
Then it's
and
great.
I have
Then it's
no
great.
doubt
It's huge.
that it is,
Then it's great.
huge.
That's the
like
thing.
huge. And by the way,
It's a great
I
deal
would,
too.
and that's another as an investor would be to talk to him about the exit of this, because I think that he is going to get to a point where people are going to want to buy this, and
But at a 10 post, like
yeah,
you could see a very clear path to
completely. But
See, I'm okay
or
with
is he
that.
gonna
If he
hold
gets
on to
if
it?
he gets a 10x exit in 18 months,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
That's a that's a sad.
I'll take that all day.
I could see, yeah.
And I'll tell you, I would
agree
not
with
have
you.
said yes if he hadn't hired Eric already.
Yes, I agree
Because
with you.
you
Me
made
too.
that point, and I think it's very important. I mean, he acknowledges
I
he's
agree.
a scientist, right? He's not the guy to run the business.
Yes.
And when he said he was having problems, okay, he did something to rectify it.
When we come back, I call up Amado and hear just how hard it can be to be a scientist in the world of business. Welcome back. 3 months have passed since Amado wowed our investors with his pitch. The last we heard, he was beginning to meet with them, hoping to close those deals.
So those meetings went really well. And the ironic thing is, in the end, I mean, Daniel just said, I don't understand the market. And it made sense for me because it was like, hey, Comcast Ventures is mostly a consumer-focused fund. So I could understand that. What was surprising was just a few weeks ago, near the start of the year, as I was kind of working on closing things with Charles and Phil, I'm like, hey, Jillian, Happy New Year, blah, blah, blah. Like, are you still interested? And then literally I got an email that was like, yeah, I just don't understand the space, I'm going to pass. So that was a bit of a disappointment.
Oh, I see. So things were progressing with Phil and Charles, but Daniel passed, and then Jillian suddenly dropped out of the deal?
Yeah. And I actually kind of went through a little existential, like, oh my God, I suck as a CEO. I can't raise worth shit, right? Like, but sorry, I don't know if I could say that word.
You totally
You
can.
can bleep that out. But in the end, I was still kind of going through this ennui, this malaise, as it were. And one of my investors just randomly called yesterday. Literally yesterday, he was like, hey, how you doing? And I was vulnerable with him. I was like, I feel incompetent. And he was like, look, like you guys are about to enter year 4 of being in existence. You haven't failed yet. Most companies fail by the time you're doing it. And he's like, you've been continuing doing what you're doing, whether you get fundraised or not. And he's like, you have of the 4 from the pitch, he's like, you have 2 who are like working on closing with you. So tell me again why you feel like crap. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't know why anymore now that you put it in that regard. And I just really had to shift my focus on like, look, you know, we actually have a business and we have revenue and we ship product and we're expanding to another country. So we did all that whether we raised or not. So it's really not that bad anymore.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good to hear, because I think getting no's and running into disappointment along the way is just like, it's so much a part of a founder's journey at so many different stages. Even when like everything looks great, but behind the scenes, like everything's not great, and like you have your ups and downs. So, but like, don't forget what you're doing is really hard.
I think my phone call with my investor really put it best. He was like, look, Amado, there is a small universe of people who actually legitimately understand what you do and understand the true value of what you guys are doing. But, you know, people know there's going to be something here. I think as a scientist, I mean, they said it on the pitch too. They're like, you have no idea how to pitch really your business, but you know the science. And so, maybe in a way that kind of builds trust and legitimacy, because I'm not trying to fill people full of BS.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like, this is what we do.
That's some pretty impressive self-awareness.
Well, it's not like we didn't get anything, right? Like we're closing with Charles and Phil.
Right. And I wanted to talk about that. Yeah.
2 out of 4 still ain't bad. Yeah.
So you're close. So what's the status of the round? Like you were raising $2 million seed round. Like right now, how is that going?
Charles and Phil have been super helpful. Phil has been introducing us to other investors, like ag investors that he knows. And Charles has taken a look at my deck, and, you know, we're about to sit together and be like, here's everything wrong with your deck and how you should frame it for investors. Because I knew that was my weakness, right? So I asked them, like, you guys are professionals. How do I make this more appealing?
Yeah.
And so they're being really helpful on that front. And so even there, like, the check isn't closed, but they're still introducing me to others, and they're like, hey, here's how, you know, better frame the story so an investor can get it, which is really useful.
Yeah.
In closing out the round. Like, we just have to find others to close it, and Phil and Charles are doing what they can to help us finish the round.
Got it. Okay, so you have to have the full 2 million, all the parties arranged, right? And then everybody signs term sheets and sends the money. Like, you don't want this coming in tranches. Right. Like, you just want to, like, this is the closing date. It's all happening here. Like, you're kind of working up to that.
Yeah.
But I mean, this sounds like really good news, right? Like, things are going well.
Yeah, no, it's actually, it's fun. Like, you know, being able to continue to do what we do. And I'm Asian American, and it's one of those, like, I don't want to have disappointed Asian father, right? But you know, these past couple years have been really humbling, and no matter what happens, we'll still be able to do it, right? Like, that's why I started a company. It was not really to get fame or fortune. I was like, hey, this is an interesting problem. I get to science the shit out of stuff and have fun doing it. So
did you say science the shit out of stuff?
Oh yeah. That's kind of our motto in our lab, is let's science the shit out of this.
At the end of the day, it's all about the science for Amado. And maybe that explains why he doesn't quite sound like a guy who just landed thousands of dollars in investments. Because until he can figure out how to close every single investor, he'll keep tinkering with the formula. We have a question for you. This whole big data thing, it sounds like a pretty ambiguous concept, and it kind of came out of nowhere. Big data is this groundswell, fueled by this ever-connected world that we now live in. But I'm curious, is this whole big data thing a fad, or will it continue to be this ever-growing, silent juggernaut that's lurking behind everything we touch? Head on over to thepitch.show/discuss Tell me what you think. Our show is produced by me, Josh Muccio, Kareem Maddox, and Molly Donahue. We are edited by Devin Taylor. We're mixed by Enoch Kim. Original music composed by The Musemaker and Bobby Lord. Our theme music is by Breakmaster Cylinder. Lisa Muccio plans our recording events, and thanks to Samira Sohail for her reporting on this episode. Amado applied to be on our show. Interested founders can apply at thepitch.show/apply. As a reminder, no offer to invest is being made to or solicited from the listening audience on today's show. All right, you've been listening to The Pitch from Gimlet Media. See you next week.
It's a very privileged position.
Is
going
it?
Last. Yes, it's the anchor of the whole show. It's great.
No, it's not. Well, you go last then.
I don't want to go last.
Okay.
I like going.
I don't want to
second
go.
last.
I don't want to go first or second.
I like going second to last.
I don't give a rat's ass.
Yeah, neither do I.